Hello, everyone. I'm Soda here with Leah, who is an amazing painter. I was looking through
Thank
her
you.
Instagram and it feels magical or enchanting. I think that's the best word, even if it's just a sketch of a leaf or something like that, there's just something very enchanting about it.
Oh,
So
good.
I'd love for you to kind of give us an introduction of yourself and a little bit about how you got into painting and maybe what your first painting was about.
Yeah. So my name is Leah, like you said. I actually grew up for part of my life, I grew up in Grand Rapids, Michigan. I'm currently living
Hmm.
in that mitten. And for another part of my life, I spent in Russia, actually. My teenage
Wow.
years were from 11 to 17. We lived in Russia. And I actually think that definitely played a bit of a role in kind of who I became and what I do now. I mean, I always liked drawing. I've never been like obsessed with drawing like a lot of artists that I know. A lot of them like carry sketchbooks everywhere, doodling on everything. I've never quite been um, that uh, that obsessed with it. Although I've always envied everyone who was. But I've always liked drawing. I mean, I remember I actually have these old books that our elementary school used to let us do, like where we could like write our own little books, and then they had a little publishing center that some of the parents ran, and I have like some illustrations and drawings in there from like books about pencils that would dance, or like sledding down the hill with my cousin or something like that. So yeah, so I have some of those. I don't remember the very first drawing or painting that I did. I remember trying to do a self-portrait and hating it.
How old were you when you did your first self portrait?
I think I was probably 10, 9 or 10. Yep.
Wow.
And I discovered it was really difficult, which it is. Yeah.
Um, so what made you because you mostly draw nature stuff or paint
Yeah.
nature stuff. What made you was it just your experience in Russia and being with nature and time with family that caused that or what?
I do think Russia played a role in it. So we didn't have a ton to do when we were like, because we didn't know anyone when we first moved there, and but we had this little balcony in the back of our apartment that overlooked first a whole bunch of cars, like a garage kind of area, but then beyond that there was this gorgeous field that had like, I mean, it was just golden, right? And I would spend hours and hours and hours just sitting on that back balcony and just daydreaming like all day long, looking over this beautiful nature space. And I definitely think that the slowness of that life had a huge impact, because I think that a lot of what I see and a lot of what I like to paint is inspired by slowing down and just paying attention to what's around me. So I think Russia played a huge role in that, in terms of loving nature. And I've always just thought it was I've had quite an active imagination my whole life. But as far as when I started painting the fairies, I mean, I didn't really start painting fairies until I was in art school. I had a class called Watercolor for the Illustrator. And in that class, we had to do a master study of like a famous artist, illustrator specifically. And I found this piece by Arthur Rackham. I think it's called Under the Serpentine or The Serpentine. Actually, I have it right here. This is my master study. It's this gorgeous piece. And so we had to do this master study of it. And while I was trying to copy like the fairies down and trying to copy the styles and learn the techniques and everything, something in me came alive. It's like it just really connected with who I am, even though I had no idea why and no idea how. I just knew. It's like I knew, like this is what I need to paint. This is what I need to illustrate, throughout my life. Um, which felt really silly at the time, to be honest. I was like, really? Like, fairies is so not serious artist type. Like, it's so ridiculous. But over the course of the last 12 years, I think, as I feel like God's been teaching me a lot about who I am and how he wired me, I feel like I've been, my understanding as to why I love to paint what I paint and why I connect so deeply with fairies has grown. And so, yeah, so that's really only been the last, 10 or 12 years that I've started painting fairies. So
As someone who loves fairy art, I am glad that you connected with that.
okay.
What you mentioned that it kind of helped you, sorry, it kind of helped you understand more about who you are. What are some other ways that painting has helped you in regards to personal development in your day-to-day life and understanding yourself?
Ooh, good question. I think some of the ways that I've grown through doing painting, or I mean, I'm also an illustrator too, is I think the fact that it doesn't always feel magical actually
Yeah.
is actually a really important growth thing for me. Like the fact that like I don't always like have the feels and feel inspired and all of those things, and yet you still create trusting that this is what it's going to be and that this is what it needs to be, and trusting that that it's, I don't know, that it's going to work out or something, and that this is still what I'm supposed to do, whether I feel really big about it right now in the moment or not. And kind of like working through all of the, like a lot of artists, I'm sure writers have the same thing, talk about the different stages in the process, the creative process, right? How you always
Mhm.
go through that phase where you're like, oh my gosh, I'm so excited, I'm so inspired, this is so amazing. And then you're like, it's the worst thing ever. Like, why are you doing this? You should never have, and going through all of that and working through and pressing through all of those difficulties, and all the internal fears and insecurities and all of those things, and just the times that over and over and over again it doesn't work. Like it just doesn't work every time. Sometimes I'll like be working on a character and I have to redraw it maybe 10 or 15 times before it finally starts to look the way I need it to look. And so yeah, I think that's definitely brought about a significant amount of personal growth for me as well.
Yeah, I can 100% relate to that, especially with writing, being kind of a more newbie writer, like having to rework the plot, rework the character, or
Right.
yeah, with art, reworking the composition. What are some ways that you're able to not like just completely feel discouraged and want to give up when you're in that situation where it's just not working and it's not being fun anymore and you have to just get yourself to either push through it or make a new version of it and still, do your painting?
Yeah. I've had, so I think one of the techniques or tools that I use to kind of trick myself out of that is by having a lot of creative outlets. Because if I just have the one, like just painting, I feel like I get stuck a lot longer and have a hard time breaking out of that. But I have a lot of different ways that I like to express creatively. Like I love to garden, and I, grow a lot of flowers and vegetables, and I'll make bouquets and sell bouquets. Or I have a big old hunk of clay, over here where I'm trying to learn how to make mugs and, all of that stuff. Or, yeah, or I like to cook really good food. But there's definitely moments where all of those things feel like none of them feel like they're firing. Like I think this last spring I hit quite a funk. I've never had one quite like this before, where it's like I had zero interest in doing and motivation to do anything creative whatsoever, which has happened a few times, never quite that bad. But I feel like really the only way to get out of it is to just do it. Like, if that makes sense, like not wanting to and just doing it anyway, drawing, even though it won't work that, just continuing on with the process. I just don't know if there's a shortcut to just pushing through and doing it when you really don't want to. Um, so
Yeah. And like honestly that like for me I definitely feel like that with a lot of my projects that it pushes you not only like especially when you're in school and you or working with a client and you have to finish it. It's not just your own thing. It really teaches you to not just push through your artistic things, but
yeah.
things in life like
Oh
making
yeah.
that doctor's appointment and
Yep.
stuff.
Exactly.
So speaking of clients and such, how much are you doing your painting professionally, or is it more of a hobby? Can you explain a little bit about how that's working for you?
Yeah. I have a few different jobs, so I don't have any that are like the main full-time one. I think I graduated with a degree in just a Bachelor of Arts, but my focus was illustration. And so I had hopes and dreams of illustrating children's books, especially, and book covers, maybe, and things like that. And I've been able to do some of that. I'd say I pretty consistently. I mean, I took a break. I didn't take a break. I kind of waited to launch my career while I had kids at home because I wanted to be the one that was there raising them for those first few early years, and I wanted to be able to be home when they got home from school and stuff. So I'm kind of only like in the last couple of years have I really like launched the career. But so I've had a pretty steady stream of like I have a children's book that I did the first edition of, and now they're having like a part 2, and so I'm working on that one. It's called Rumpus Mugumpus. And so I have a few illustration projects. I work with a publisher, and I do book covers for a publisher, just kind of as needed, usually like, I don't know, one a month or something like that. And then I have another client, also an illustration project, working with her on a book specifically for boys, trying to help them learn healthier patterns of dealing with hard things in life. Specifically, she's trying to help break patterns of thought that usually end up bringing them to prison or to crime. And so anyway, so I have a whole bunch of different illustration projects that I have going. And then I do the fine art. It's hard to say in terms of the amount of time because it depends on the season. There's definitely seasons where I have more illustration projects, and then other seasons where I'm cranking really hard and I've got a gallery showing coming up. But I've done a few gallery showings, though the landscapes and all of those initially were just because I wanted them in my house. they were the types of paintings that I really wanted to have in my house. And then thought, hey, in terms of diversifying income, which I know a lot of artists talk about how important that is, not just having one main thing. I started prints on my website of the landscapes and stuff in hopes that I'd be able to have that kind of thing that'd be like a easier, different type of income, which has worked pretty well, but then also has led to some gallery showings. I have 2 gallery showings I did this year, which is really exciting. But I also brought in a whole bunch of my fairy paintings, and that's actually, people like the landscapes for sure, but a lot of people really connect with the fairy paintings for sure. Those are, which surprised me. I didn't think as many people would like them as they do, but so I do that. I am a mom as well. But then I also am a worship pastor at our church part-time. So it's like, 8 hours a week or so. So I kind of have a lot of different different areas that I jump around in and selling the bouquets in the summer. So it kind of depends on the season. I don't think any of them really take a major amount of time. But yeah, that I do the fairies and the fine art. I do those. Those are just the things that I want to do. And so I try to make sure that I have time to do those things, because I do think that doing the things that we really love, I think people really like to see and want to see the stuff that we really are passionate about doing. So
Yeah, and I think that really shines through. If I know a lot of people who will be listening to this are writers, so If now that I know that you do stuff with writers, that's, I don't know if you're taking commissions at all, but where can people find your information to check out your art?
Yeah, I have on Instagram. I have an account on Instagram, just Leah underscore Morrison underscore creative. And then I also have a website, just leahmorrisoncreative.com. And both places you can find contact information for me, and reach out if you're interested in some commissions or yeah, things like that.
Awesome. So yeah, and I will also put those links below. And so you mentioned that you did some gallery showings, and
Yeah.
I've had a lot of my art friends ask questions about how they can get into galleries and what it's like and what the process is, and maybe some alternatives. I didn't know if you
Yeah.
could give some insight on that.
Yeah, for sure. I actually started off fully intending to never do gallery shows because from everything I could see, I'm like, man, it's a lot of work and it's just such a crapshoot as to whether or not it's going to work, whether or not people are going to buy stuff. And, and I was like, man, I don't think I ever want to do that. But then a friend of mine who has done a few connected with a local gallery and just paid attention to different exhibitions that they had going on. And they had a wonder exhibition. And she was like, you have to get your stuff in there. You need to apply. So she's actually the one that sent me the link. I think I'll see if I can, there's a certain website that keeps track of exhibitions that are going on all over the country. And you can type in and search for certain types of things that you feel like you qualify for, and they'll actually let you know what exhibitions you could try to apply for. And so I'll see if I can send that to you if I can find it. But that's a great place to start if you don't have any connections. But yeah, this one happened to be a local gallery. And so I had applied for it and got oddly enough, the companion piece to this fairy piece, my original one, ended up in that gallery showing. And then actually they came up to me at the end of the showing and asked if I would be interested in doing a solo show because they really liked my stuff. So yeah, so that was really exciting. And then I started frantically scurrying like crazy to try to get enough pieces to be a whole solo show. I mean, I had quite a few already made, but obviously there was just lots of, I hadn't created my work thinking about a gallery. So I had to create more work so that I had cohesive, pieces all together. And then of course there's an entry fee. If you're doing an exhibition, there's an entry fee usually. I think that this one was $40, which I think is pretty, 40 to 60 is pretty average. And so there was an entry fee for that one. The solo show didn't have an entry fee, but it involved professionally framing and matting 22 pieces of art, which is a huge cost. It's like a huge upfront cost. And it took me forever I have been collecting because of course I'm like, this is going to sound so artsy fartsy. I'm like, every single individual piece has its own little feel and it needs just the right frame to go, I can't just do the same frame for every single painting. Like they each need to have their own frame. And so I've been collecting, frames from secondhand stores, and my mother-in-law had them and brought them into the framer and, paid the expense of the glass and the matting and the framing. And it was definitely a huge expense. They were thankfully very generous. And I think they actually really loved my artwork. And so he gave me a really big discount, which was really sweet. But yeah, that was pretty expensive and really terrifying. First of all, because it was the first time that my artwork was not being shared through my own social media platform, which is limited in terms, it's not a fully public place, right? There's only so many people that could see it. A gallery was the first time just strangers would be walking in and looking at my artwork. So it was terrifying. It was expensive. And it was a lot of work. And so I thought, I'll do it one time and we'll see if it pays off. And if it does, then maybe we'll continue. Um, and I did sell. I think I between that and they also offered prints. I did make back what I invested in the framing, plus some extra profit. So that was really good. And then since I already had everything framed, I only sold a few pieces in that show. And so I had another friend who has a gallery reach out, and she's like, "Oh, could we have your pieces for a month and a half or so?" And so yeah, I was like, they're already ready. So I decided to try that, and I've sold a few pieces through there as well. So yeah, it's an interesting process for sure. It's really risky. I mean, kind of the same thing with like art fairs and shows. You put a lot of work in and you just have no idea. A lot of people might connect with it, but you have no idea if people are going to buy it. So
Yeah, and it sounds like it kind of like pushed you to really get all those things
it
framed.
did. I was really grateful for it. Like it pushed me to produce work, like to produce
Mhm.
artwork, and also, yeah, to get everything framed.
My last question is, how do you have any advice, encouragement, or tips for people who are um, maybe lost touch with their artistic side
Mhm.
and want to, when in this digital age, there's a lot of pressure to kind of do more like digital art and
Yeah.
stuff. And while I love digital art, it's more convenient. There's something about doing traditional art that
Hmm.
really connects with you. And but it's also kind of more inconvenient and expensive. Do you have any tips on how you can um, get into it, even if it's just for personal use?
Yeah. Um, I mean, I feel like one of the most important things to do is to just be curious. And I think you may not naturally initially be curious about things, but I think if you just start, you can actually foster curiosity. I think you can actually practice curiosity with different things. So I think, yeah, just getting really curious about things and allowing yourself, I don't know, space to dream a little bit and imagine when you're starting to think of like, oh, maybe I could do this or maybe I could do that. So I think you can easily start with really simple, non-expensive things. There's the thing is that's fat. Like you can go the route of starting with something like really expensive, like getting a whole big, really high quality paint set, which is cool. If you're really excited about painting, just go for it and do it. But also, there's tons of things all around nature that you can actually use for free and I think that's the most fun part about it. I have a friend, she's also on Instagram. Her name's Gabriella Esma, I think. Now I'm trying to, yeah, I think that's her name. But she just creates all of her own watercolors and inks from nature. Like she spent all of this time learning about, how to gather berries and what you need to add to them to make them like light fast. It's freaking fascinating. She loves like acorns and
Yeah, please
walnuts.
send me the link because I have a sister who makes her own paper and is
Yeah.
wanting to learn more about that. And now I'm like, I want to learn how to do all
Oh
that too.
yeah,
So yes,
for
please.
sure. And like, I mean, if you're local, you're probably not. I don't know. Maybe someone listening is in Grand Rapids. She's actually got a thing at Blandford Nature Center, a workshop on teaching people how to do this. But yeah, so you can do that. Also, this is something that I think is super exciting. You can dig and find your own clay in your own yard. Like you don't actually have to buy a big thing of clay. I mean, it's not terribly expensive to buy it, but it's also super exciting and fun when you like dig a hole in your yard and like learn how to sift and gather your own clay. And you don't even need a kiln to fire it. There's like ways to wood fire it in your own backyard, or even like this guy. His name's Andy. He's on YouTube, and he's got all of these different videos teaching people how to gather their own clay, how to sift their own clay, how to fire their own clay. And he does it like just in his driveway with a few bricks and, some fire starters. So I think like the best way to get into it is to just get really curious about things and try stuff, not be too afraid or feel like you need all the right tools or professional tools in order to start stretching yourself and trying new things. And I think curiosity naturally like leads like one thing to another thing to another thing to another thing. Like that's the way it works in our house. Starts with one thing, and then we're like on to 100 other things. And my husband's kind of he's an engineer, oddly enough, but he's also the same way, where he's just like really curious about stuff. And so he's like, I wonder if we could make our own beer, or I wonder if we could, if I could like carve my own wood, or like smoke my own meat. And like it just kind of like continues. And so I think just finding something that you're curious about and just taking the plunge. It's usually not as overwhelming as it seems like it is, or as intimidating is probably a better word, as it seems like it is in the start. It also might not be as easy as you think, but that's okay. Don't give up just because you don't get it. Like working with clay, I feel like, I should be able to get this. It's really difficult, but it's worth trying, and having lots of failed projects and everything. So yeah.
I love that advice. And yeah, I grew up always making my own clay. We lived in California, in like a little desert area for a while, and we would
cool.
just dig up and make the like adobe kind of clay. Yeah, so that I love sculpture. But yes, I love that message, whether you want to go into art professionally, or you just want some creativity. I know a lot of writers and musicians benefit from doing art. So yes, I love that message. And thanks again for meeting with me. I will make sure to post your links down below, and any some of the Instagram people you mentioned, if you want to put those down below. And have a wonderful rest of your day then.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.